Hello and welcome to Until Saturday, the Athletics College Football Podcast. I am David Ubben, and I see those icy whites LSU. Top 3 uniforms in the country? I think so.
I'm Chris Vannini, and I think Illinois last week had the best uniforms in the nation.
Shout out to the hand-painted leather helmets. I loved it.
Wow, interesting pick, Chris. Well, I'm Damien Harris, former Alabama running back. And as much as it pains me to say this, I think Ohio State has some of the best uniforms in the country. You got the smoke grays, you got the all blacks. I might have to go Ohio State. Best unis in the country. I don't know.
We need to. I feel like helmet stickers. We got to get more in the helmet stickers. Anyway,
yeah, they're killing it.
Today's podcast, I promise, not a fashion show, but LSU, I mentioned before, a huge game against Texas A&M to stay atop the SEC standings. We'll predict and pick the outcome of that game, as well as Oregon, Illinois. Yes, that's a conference game. Texas Vandy, also a conference game, and many others on our weekly picks podcast. Later in the show, we're also going to ask, can Navy upset Notre Dame? But the midshipmen are the only group of 5 team with a huge game this week. Boise, UNLV, put the pot of coffee on late night Friday. They're going to square off in a Mountain West Conference showdown with major playoff implications. It might be the first of 2 meetings between these 2 teams if they meet again in the Mountain West Conference championship game. And there's some big narrative games too. Alabama and Missouri, and Indiana facing off against Washington in that game. Also a conference game, believe it or not. We're in the new world, and get used to it. There's a lot to get to on today's show, so let's get right to the matchup in College Station. Once again, guys, all of our lines are presented by BetMGM, and LSU going into Kyle Fields, 2.5-point underdog, over-under here at 53.5. Damien, you played both of these spots. College Station or Death Valley, harder to play?
Ubben, it's really a toss-up, and I got to give you 2 separate answers just because it's really hard to decide. These are 2 great atmospheres, 2 really tough places to play. I'm going to go daytime game, like that 3 p.m. slot, transitioning into nighttime. The sun's going to go down, day-to-night game. I got to go Kyle Field. Like, Aggie Land is rocking during the day. They're up and at it early, which I don't know how because they do the midnight yell, but they're already up and at it, ready to go, 3 p.m. Yeah, crazy. Chris, you got it, yeah. Crazy environment. But you talk about nighttime when the sun goes down, the lights are out, the celebrities are out. I mean, people had all day to pregame and drink and do God knows what that they do down in Louisiana. I got to go Death Valley at night. I mean, there's truly nothing like it. And, maybe my experience is a little bit different because it was always like number 1 versus number 2 or number 1 versus number 3, something like that. But I would say if I had to compare the 2, I would give you a 50-50 answer, and I would say daytime at Aggie Land and nighttime at Death Valley. So
I like it.
Yeah,
I feel like Kyle Field is playing with some chip on its shoulder because remember it was number 1 in college football 25, and then before the season even started, they changed it and they made LSU number 1, and then A&M loses to Notre Dame in week 1. So they've been working their way back.
Damien, what was your first interaction? The first time you became aware of or saw America's favorite milkmen, the A&M yell leaders?
I was very thrown for sure. Just because, Chris, what do they even call this? What is this called?
It's like farmers fight. They do like
farmers fight, and then there's like a hump it that they do. There's a lot.
Well, you got of stuff that just. Well, you got to think. You got to think about some of the dudes that I played with at Bama, right? Like some of these dudes were really about that life. You know what I'm saying? We're running on the field, and next thing you see a bunch of people that just upping it like this. You know what I'm saying? You get some crazy looks. You know what I mean? You hold some guys back. No, but it was definitely crazy. Like I said, Aggie Land, that culture that they have down there, those fans, the yell leaders. I don't even know what the hell they're called. Like you said, America's favorite milkman, whatever they are. It's crazy how much they pour into those games. And like the 12th man, I think that saying, that feeling that there's an extra guy, like it's real. So LSU's gonna have a tough time on the road against all the fighting Aggies they're gonna have to deal with.
Chris, when on the field, when we see these 2 teams play, I think people thought both these teams had some upside. I don't think we thought that the stakes would be what they seem to be in this one.
No, these 2 teams are atop the SEC. They are the first place teams undefeated in the SEC, which is not anything we expected coming in, especially from Texas A&M.
Yeah. And especially if they lost that opener.
There's a really good chance the winner of this game is going to the playoff. Like, not only just potentially to the SEC championship game, because LSU after this, they've got a bye, then Bama, Florida, Vandy, Oklahoma. A&M's got South Carolina bye, New Mexico State, Auburn, Texas. So, like, especially if A&M wins this game, like, you've got a path there in a way that I don't think anybody expected. So that makes this one of the biggest games of the weekend because of the stakes. This is the kind of game that in the old playoff we may not have thought about very much, and instead it has massive stakes for the playoff, for the SEC, and for everything. And I think this is going to be a crazy scene in College Station.
Mm-hmm. Damien, you made the Aggie Land crowd your Dame's dog of the week for this game, and right. I think the guy that they're going to be yelling at, Garrett Nussmeier, I got to tell you. So I draft him in the Athletics Heisman draft. I like what I've seen from him. I've been on board. Basically, the first time I saw him was when he came in for Jaden Daniels in the SEC Championship in 22.
Yeah,
and just torched Georgia. And now, granted, Georgia's winning that game. You know, it was not the Georgia team that was, you know, dead set on not letting them score, but it's still a really good defense. And he hadn't really played a ton. And I was like, this guy can sling it. And we've seen that this year. And I think we were talking about this the other day. I think the best compliment I can give him, and I mean this truly as a compliment, is how robotic that he seems to be sometimes. And that, you know, he has that Tom Brady to him in the pocket where he can make subtle movements, keep his platform, keep his eyes downfield, and then just cut it loose. The problem, you know, not to besmirch our beloved Diego Pavia, but when the pocket breaks down for him, the mechanics are going out the window. He is running. That's the former wrestler.
Full Johnny Football.
He's just running around. If you watch Garrett Nussmeier, he'll give it a little shoulder shimmy shake, duck underneath the tackle, trying to go around, step up. Really good at climbing the pocket. I mean, this is what happens when you have a guy who, one, you know, is the son of an offensive coach, and two, you know, has been training to be a quarterback for probably his entire life. The technique that he seems to have, the composure that he seems to have, the decision making, I think that comes with experience. He's made some weird decisions. They were losing to Ole Miss in part because of some decisions that he made earlier in that game. But when they needed him, and in doing it in some tight spots late in that Ole Miss game, he was really, really impressive. And his numbers are really good. They're not crazy, but I think he may have the unofficial national lead in dimes dropped in anybody in the sport this year. He's really, really fun to watch, and I think he's going to be faced with a really, really big test. But I'm excited to see.
Yeah, and on the other side, I'm really curious what Texas A&M we get, because Connor Wegman this year has been like all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was bad at the beginning. He gets hurt. Yates comes in. It's that game. No, I'm sorry. Marcel comes in that game. They beat Florida. Wegman comes back against Missouri and lights the world on fire. It looks incredible. And then, like, not great last week. So, like, what are we going to get week to week with that Texas A&M offense? We don't know. And I have been saying this for a couple of weeks now. LSU's defense keeps getting better every week. In the back end, they're better. And again, without Harold Perkins, I think they have guys who kind of fit in that defense a bit better. And this was obviously such a hole for them last year. The defense was terrible, and they've just been getting better each week.
Mm-hmm. Damien, who you like in this game?
I don't know. This is tough. This is tough for me because, like Chris said, I want to know what Connor Wegman we're going to see, because I feel like if we see the Missouri Connor Wegman that came back off an injury with the chip on his shoulder, proving this is my team, Marcel Reed, you're my guy, sit on the bench because I'm still here. I'm still that guy. If we see that kind of Connor Wegman, I think that he can play well enough to defeat the Garrett Nussmeier, who is incredibly tough, who plays really, really well under pressure, but he still does make those boneheaded mistakes, some of those head scratches where we're like, WTF, bro? Like, what are you doing? You're so much better than this. Like, your mechanics are great. Like David's talking about, your feet are set. You're looking in the right place. Just deliver the ball. You're just making those silly plays. But I'm gonna go with LSU. I don't know. I think that Connor Wegman is still he's still just not quite there yet. I think he can be. Clearly, he proved that against Missouri. But if I had to just isolate the quarterback matchup and say this game is going to be won by who has the better quarterback, I would say based on what we've all seen, we got to go with Garrett Nussmeier and LSU.
I think you're going to see a home dog bark in this one. I like A&M to get this done. I mean, I don't mean this to ruffle LSU's feathers. LSU's not one of the 10 best teams in the country. They're a very good team. They're a team that is improving quite a bit, but they're not one of the 10 best teams in the country. And this A&M team, what we've seen from Mike Elko, I think, is what people thought that we were going to see in the wake of losing Jimbo is this is still a pretty talented team, but they're just aggressively competent. You watch LSU, they don't beat themselves a lot. I think it's going to be a tough spot for LSU coming in here. I like the Aggies to go and not only cover, but win this outright. Chris, what do you like?
The thing about saying they're not a top 10 team is that somebody has to be a top 10 team. And it kind of goes with the playoff. Like we're saying, is this a playoff team? Is this a top 10 team? They don't need to be compared to what you imagine a top 10 team to be. They're compared to who else is out there.
I'm just talking about teams I watch. I watch LSU. The personnel does not wow me. I think Nussmeier gives them a really, really higher floor than a lot of teams. But you watch them and you're kind of like, they can't really run the ball defensively. The personnel is not what you would note from an LSU team. I do like our guy Whit Weeks. I've fallen in love with him, but they just don't have a lot of guys. You think about the teams that LSU has had in the past. Okay, it's just not the same. And I think that you like their tackles, but Kyron Lacey's been just okay. I just think the personnel, when you look at this LSU team and other teams in the country this year, is just there's not a lot of guys that make you say wow.
No, and this is they've got a bye next week and then Bama. This is continuing a stretch of pretty big games. Can they get up for it again? Mm-hmm. But I think ultimately both these teams have flaws. LSU can't and isn't even trying to run the ball. A&M, you never know what you're going to get at quarterback. The offensive line's kind of been in flux. I'm going to go LSU wins this one.
All right. Next, we got Oregon, a 21.5-point favorite against a ranked Illinois team.
Wow.
Can you believe that line?
That's a big number. That is a big, big number. Dame, we'll start with you. Who's your dog for this one?
So my dog is going to be Oregon, their offense and these receivers, Dylan Riley, really this passing game as a whole. And how are they going to start to hit these explosive plays against a really, really good Illinois defense? And I'm going to tell you how. It's not going to be by going for the chunk plays. It's not going to be for the big posts, the deep shots, the 20-yard completions. Illinois' defense is really, really good at playing what some people call elbow defense. You bend, but you don't break. You keep guys back. You don't let the ball get behind you, and you just make teams drive. A team like Oregon, who is good, but make them show you. You make them drive, play after play after play, 12-play drive. That's how you play good defense. You don't let anything get behind you. But here's where Oregon has an advantage. Illinois blitzes, they've got the 10th highest blitz rate in all of the country at 39%. How do you beat that? By hitting quick, hot routes behind it. Get the receivers in quick routes. And then once you get behind these blitzers and once you find these open spots, then the run after catch opportunity becomes huge. Then you take a 5-yard slant, a 5-yard hit, you break one tackle. Next thing you know, you're getting tackled 40, 50 yards later. You might even be able to score. So I think if Oregon's offense is Dylan Gabriel, if they can communicate and pick up these blitzes, because Illinois is going to send them, if they can pick them up, if they can communicate and have guys get open in a quick manner and Dylan Gabriel can get them the ball, they'll have all the opportunity in the second and third level to get those big explosive chunk plays and then really run up the score like we're used to seeing from these Oregon offenses.
I think it's a great point because they've got the perfect personnel to do this. And, we talked a lot about exactly. We talked a lot about Evan Stewart all off season, and I think he does give them a vertical threat. But Tez Johnson, all 5'10", 165 pounds, soaking wet of the kid. He's been Dylan Gabriel's favorite target. And he's been a guy that has played a ton of football. He's got 57 catches this year. And he's a guy they use a lot in the screen game. And he's a guy that is so shifty. And I think you're right, Dave, that if you can get him on the outside, if you like your numbers, and they're going to bring 5, 6, maybe 7 guys, this is a guy that it's hard to get him square and knock him out. And he doesn't have the same, when you watch him run routes versus, Evan Stewart, you're not saying, oh man, like this guy is unbelievable, but he's one of those guys that's tough to get your hands on it in a phone booth. And they use him so much in that screen game. I think that's going to be huge for them in this game.
What I want to know, can Illinois muck this up? You look at their stats defensively, they're not really good in much of anything. They're not making the TFLs and the sacks despite blitzing so much. They're not great in the red zone. They're not great on third down, but they're 13th in turnover margin. And to what Dame's point, they allow one play of 30 plus yards per game. That's 11th best in the country. They are making you go the length of the field. And that's what they're going to have to try to do here. I looked up the box score with Penn State because that's probably the most comparable team that they've played, a top 5 team, with good quarterback and whatnot. And the longest play Penn State had in that game was 20 yards. Now there were some there was a 10-yard run and an 11-yard run. So they kind of got those medium plays, but Penn State couldn't finish drives. They missed 1 or 2 field goals in that game, needed a touchdown late to win 21-7. So Illinois has just kind of been playing to their opponent and getting the big plays at the right time. Can you do that on the road when you're traveling across the country and you're going to have the time zone whole deal? So, yeah, but Illinois has been much, much better this year than I've expected.
For me, go ahead, Dame.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, to Chris's point, you know how they can muck it up is by punching the ball out, because they are top 10 in the country in forced fumbles right now. So just like I talked about they're 5th in the country with enforced fumbles. So like I was talking about earlier, if Oregon, just because Oregon catches these guys in blitzes, they can get 30, 40 yards down the field and somebody come punch it out. That can completely ruin a drive for Oregon's offense. So yeah, to your point, that's exactly how they can muck it up. And that's how they've been doing it so far for a lot of teams.
I really like Illinois to keep this close. I do think this line is a little insulting to the Illini. I think people just assume that Oregon is just scoring at will, and they're not. And this is a team that's going to be able to slow them down. And I don't think that they're going to be a team that's going to slow down this running game. And on top of that, Luke Altmaier's been really good. Mistake-free football. He's one of 2 quarterbacks in the country this year, along with Alonzo Barnett, James Madison, with 15 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's a guy that's grown up a lot since the first time that we saw him, and he's a guy that is really paying off for Illinois at this point. And I think he plays well enough. They do muck it up enough that this game is tight. I think Oregon doesn't necessarily feel like any point in the second half they're going to lose, but they're not covering this.
As I looked at it, the line jumped out. 21.5 point favorite is a lot, but I'm going to go with Oregon covering because maybe you don't count on that turnover luck. And you got to travel across, and that hasn't been going great. I'm going to go Oregon to win this big and kind of get back on track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Oregon to win, just because I think, as we've seen right now, other than Georgia, Oregon is the best team in the country right now. But Illinois definitely covers the spread. There's no way that they lose by more than 21.5 points. I mean, they're going to keep this game close. And I think that it will be. I think it will be one of those games where Oregon is down in the fourth quarter trying to figure out, are we going to win this game? It's going to be close. It's going to be tight. But they do find a way to pull it out.
Next up, we got Texas going to Nashville to face Vandy, a ranked Vandy team. Playing, I believe this is the first time since 2008 that Vandy has played in the regular season as a ranked team. They will
I can't believe this didn't get College Game Day. By the way, I thought this was a lot.
I mean, if you're gonna have to do Bloomington, you want to do Bloomington when you can get it, but you might not get Vandy again. I'm with you on this. I would have liked to have seen Vandy, but it is what it is. I guess.
I mean, they're both kind of the stories of the season, really. Vanderbilt and Indiana, and who knows Indiana's chances later in the year. But I thought that for weeks, I thought this was going to be a lock. And, maybe Texas losing changed that.
Maybe I think it did. Vandy, an 18.5 point dog here, over under at 53.5. Dame, your dog of the week is just Texas trying to figure this out and come back after this. I don't know who Vandy paid in the SEC. I think we all know the SEC obviously has a very pro Vandy stance. They scheduling. They get Alabama the week after they play Georgia. Now they get Texas the week after they play Georgia. Fortuitous scheduling. The difference here is this Texas team lost. Dame, what are you keeping an eye on with the Longhorns?
Well, so my thought, is as a team that's supposed to be great, how do you bounce back from a loss? A big loss, prime time, you're at home. What can you really focus on going into another game, especially against a team which Vandy has all the respect in the world right now, but I believe Texas is much better than this Vandy team. So what is the key going to be for them? In my mind, just going, they just got to beat the hell out of them. They have to just come out and convincingly, just from top to bottom, offensively, defensively, just whoop the shit out of them. I mean, they got to take Diego Pavia out of the game. Quinn Ewers has got to look better. The offense has got to look better. I mean, everything that we saw in this Georgia game, I was really surprised by a lot of things. One of the biggest surprises to me was, I talked about Dame's dogs last week, Georgia's secondary being really susceptible to a lot of motions and a lot of eye candy and stuff like that. Well, Sark didn't come out and do any of that in the first half against Georgia. And I'm sitting here well, what the hell? I'm trying to figure out, why not? So even from the coaching regard, they just have to come out with the mindset of, we got to beat the hell out of this team. We are Texas. We were the number 1 team in the country. We just lost at home. We had every chance in the world to win and beat a really, really good Georgia team. Well, we got to take that out on Vandy. But I have an interesting thought now because I'm thinking about how do you bounce back from big games. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this because how important is it really to bounce back from big losses anymore? Because we're talking about a 12-team playoff system, which is great. I'm not gonna talk bad about it anymore. I've had people call me out about my comments before, so I'm not saying that it's a bad system. But we look at teams like Texas, like Georgia, and we essentially cap them at 3 losses and say, with 3 losses, you can probably still get into the 12-team playoff. So now you lose one game, and okay, say they beat Vandy, but they don't bounce back like what we're talking about. They don't come out and really, really perform. They just, skate by with a 3-point win. Does that, or like you guys catching my drift here? Like, is there as big of an emphasis on really bouncing back from these games? Because you look at Georgia, or you look at Alabama after they lost to Vandy, did they bounce back? No. They haven't bounced back. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think that's a conversation that I think about because, again, when you're capping these teams and they're counting their losses, like, okay, we got 2 more losses before we're really, really out of the playoff contention. I don't know. It's an interesting thought to me.
It's a different headspace than when you played. Because, I mean, you guys, you lost to Auburn that year, but then Auburn lost in the SEC championship game and you guys got into the playoff. So
you were only afforded 1 loss back then.
Yeah, and I was at the Texas-Georgia game, and after the game, that was Steve Sarkisian's message was, look, all our goals are still in front of us. And I've talked to some people at Texas this week, and it's the same thing. It's like, yes, that was a tough loss, but we've still got a lot to play for. And in that sense, I think it makes losses feel less devastating for a team. Now, Alabama Vandy, that might be a little bit different because that's something that never happens. But I think Texas knows that they can do this. The stat I'm going to be looking for in this game is third downs, because Vanderbilt is 8th in the country in third down conversions. We remember that's how they beat Bama. They kept getting those third downs, like whatever the number was, huge, like 11 for 14 or something. Texas's defense is 10th in third down defense. They have been getting off the field. And so can Vandy keep those drives going? Because that is what Texas has been able to do to stop teams. So if Vanderbilt is going 3 and outs or 5 and outs or whatever, that's not going to cut it. They're going to have to keep those plays going.
I think to your question, Dame, I think the thing that's interesting to me is to me it matters if you lose a game that you feel like you should have won, and then it costs you, and you're sitting there thinking, "Whoa, woe is me! We should have had that. We should have had that." Versus a loss like Texas had, where like you got humbled. Like we got to get better. I think that matters. I think if you lose a game like, Ohio State losing to Oregon, Ohio State probably should have won that game. They seem like they were probably the better team. They were winning for a lot of that. Texas, you're playing a quarter and a half, and you're like, we gotta get right. And I think that probably lends itself more to a renewed focus on the Vandy side of things. So, we've given obviously Diego Pavia a lot of attention. Eli Stowers is low-key one of the more interesting stories on this team, too. He was a 4-star quarterback coming out of high school, goes to A&M, doesn't get on the field, transfers to New Mexico State, still doesn't get on the field as a quarterback, moves to tight end. He's an all-CUSA tight end last year. Helps them win a bunch of games, get to a bowl game, then comes with that whole crew, Jerry Kill, Tim Beck, Diego Pavia from New Mexico State out here in Vandy. And now this year, he's his best target, leading the team in receptions. He's like 3rd nationally among tight ends. Guy with a 41.5 point vertical jump. Pretty impressive. He made it on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. So Vandy's still got some dudes, and Diego Pavia is not the only great story on this team. I think this is a line that is still pretty disrespectful to Vandy, who is playing really good. They're probably not one of the 25 best teams in the country, but I'm not sure that they're 20 points worse than Texas at home. Give me the Commodores to win this. Chris, who do you like in this one?
You got the Commodores covering.
They're going to cover. No, they're not winning outright, but they'll cover.
So, the other part of this game, the other storyline is like the pressure on Quinn Ewers now. Like, yes, he came back into that game, but now this is what I wrote about, and this is what I wrote about after the game. Every time he doesn't play well, Arch Manning could come in now because that seal has been lifted as it was against Georgia, even though Arch didn't play all that well. That is now on the table. Then you've got this fake Quinn Ewers story that went around this week, the 24/7 Sports Instagram, that he was going to sit out the season. They said they got hacked. Quinn called it fake news. And so it's just a lot of continue to be bad vibes, I guess, around that quarterback situation. But we're going to need Quinn Ewers to get back to looking like Quinn Ewers, and he hasn't since he come back from that injury. You wonder if the oblique injury, if he can't make those off-balance throws that he was doing against Michigan and stuff like that. But yeah, we're gonna be on quarterback watch for Texas pretty much from here on out.
Sark says he's okay. You were at the game last week, Chris, when you watched him. Do you think that Quinn's at 100%? Sark seemed to downplay any idea that like, oh no, he's still a little sore.
Well, and I asked Quinn too. I said, like, how's it feeling? And he goes, well, no, I think it's fine, but maybe mentally you think about it. Think about when it hurt, and it's kind of something you have to get over. And so we'll see. I think Quinn's eyes were terrible in that game. He was getting pressured. He wasn't seeing things right. That's what Sark said. I'm gonna go Texas wins. Vandy covers the 18.5 because I think Vandy can score.
Mm-hmm. Damien, are you a Vandy believer along with us?
I am. I think Texas wins outright. I think Chris hit the nail right on the head. There's a lot circling around Quinn Ewers. And I think that what we've seen so far, it might be a problem for him. And I don't like that for Texas. I don't like that for Quinn. So I definitely like Vandy to cover.
And I hope you guys are ready for Friday night. I am very excited to watch this ball game. Boise, a 3.5-point dog going to UNLV. The over-under in this game, 65.5. We should see a lot of points in theory. And we've been talking about this game for almost a month since Boise and UNLV have kind of announced themselves as like, hey, we're at the top of this list of teams that are contending for these playoff spots. And Dame, dare I say,
you know who it is.
The dog of the year.
You know who it is. The dog of the year.
Your favorite running back's favorite running back.
Yes.
What are you keeping an eye on with our guy Genty this year?
Everybody is so, into this Heisman conversation. Where's he at? Is he going to be the first running back in a long time to win? I know a lot of people obviously have their eyes on Barry Sanders' record, and that's where I'm glued to. And the most impressive thing to me, and what I want to let these people know is, ladies and gentlemen, he can realistically break Barry Sanders' record before we get to conference championship, before we get to the playoffs. Like, he can do this in the regular season. He only needs 230 yards per game to break the record.
That's
and right
all?
now he's already, that's it. Right. That's it. And he's already averaging 208 yards a game. He's not playing in the second half of some games. Like they don't need him to really carry them from the first quarter to the last quarter. But now that we're at the end of the season, we're in the thick of the schedule. We're getting to that conference championship time. Yeah. We're getting to the 12-team playoff time. Like, he's going to have to play from the first snap to the last snap. And Lord, please protect this brother, because I do not want to see anything, and I mean anything, deter him from everything that he has worked so hard to get. Yeah. And I want to see him not only win the Heisman, but I want to see him break Barry Sanders' record. And not only just his rushing record, he's actually on pace to break his touchdown record too at 37 touchdowns, because he's got 17 already. Yeah. So he's very on pace. And I think with the playoff schedule, the conference championships, that serves him better in the touchdown record category. But I'm really looking forward to, I think this brother can break this record in the regular season. I really think he can. And I'm just hoping that he stays on track. I hope that the guys up front keep doing that thing for him. I pray that he keeps making the same plays and keeps showing off his ability. And if he does, I think we'll be looking at a new record holder, a Heisman Trophy winner, first round pick, maybe even a Dallas Cowboy if he can have it his way. We're going to be looking at a real special season.
I love it, man. I think it's he's got it. If there was ever a game for him to hit the 300 mark, this would be it. He's a good offense, not exactly the 85 Bears on defense. And I think this is a game that, he's had a few games this year where he probably could have flirted with 300 yards. I think he might get there at some point. Chris, when you look at the G5 race, these teams are, I think Boise's clearly the best team overall, but you got to earn it. What do you feel like is at stake here when you look at where this stands for the playoff?
Yeah, real quick on Barry's record. That was done in, technically the record is what he did in 11 games. They don't count the 12th game, which was the bowl game, because the NCAA didn't count bowl stats until like 2000. I have no idea why they haven't gone back and retroactively included the stats. It's bizarre. But Genty's on pace to right now, I think, do it in the 14th game, which would be a postseason game. But again, he didn't play 2 first halves. So in the first 2 second halves in the first half of the season. So
Chris, we circled around to players now. Players don't count bowl stats anymore either.
Yeah. But I am so excited about this game because this is the biggest group of 5 game that we've had in years.
Can we say ever?
A decade plus?
I think we can say ever, Chris.
If like we had, like
5.
there was like the Boise State TCU Fiesta Bowl that year, but that was really
annoying.
That was just an exhibition game. It wasn't the winner of this game is going to be in the leading position to make the college football playoff, and that is really, really exciting. And both of these teams have a loss, but they're probably again if they continue to play the way they've been playing, you probably meet in the Mountain West Championship. And if one of those teams wins both of them and you've got one loss, there's a really good chance you're the team. Yes, Liberty is still undefeated, but they've not played great so far. And the American has some teams there, but they're all going to play each other and might beat each other up. So we'll see. But the only disappointing part is that this game is 10:30 p.m. on a Friday.
I want to talk about it.
We wanted to go to this game.
Yeah, I almost pitched it. I was like, I want to cover it. And then I thought through the logistics. A little peek behind the curtain. College football Saturdays are a lot. And for Chris and I and most of the people on our staff, I kind of idly watch game day. If I'm home, I'll hang out with my kids and stuff. And but generally you're traveling somewhere. And then by the time the noon games start, I'm usually parked somewhere. And then I'll usually go somewhere if I'm covering a game. But you're watching games, all day. And you kind of have to get up early because you got a bunch of other crap you got to do and all that stuff. So if you're trying to cover it, you're talking about getting just logistically. I got chills trying to think about oh man, that sounds terrible. So
I am glad I'm going to be home this weekend.
Me too. I'm not coming to a game this weekend.
I couldn't stay up for last week's Friday night games because I had to get up at 7 a.m. and drive to Austin from Dallas. Mm-hmm. So that was just I had to get some sleep somewhere. But this game is going to be so much fun. Dave, give us the UNLV side of things because we all remember the Sluka stuff, but Hajj Malik Williams has been tearing it up.
The Sluka stuff, Chris, as you so callously referred to it as, he left the team in midseason, and I think since then, I asked some questions of how he won that job in the preseason because Hajj Malik Williams has been significantly better. He's been maybe not as a productive a runner, but I would say more dynamic a runner. And I think when you watched UNLV the first month of the season, you're like, Sluka, this guy's fun. I don't know how great he is, but he's running around out there. It's it was very freelance based. But if you look at Hajj
he was completing 45% of his passes.
Yes. Sluka our guy Hajj Malik Williams is completing about 70% of his passes. His passer rating is about 50 points higher. Completion percentage about 30 points higher. His yards per attempt about 3 points higher. He's been better. UNLV has been better. I think that does illustrate in some ways why UNLV played this the way that they played it, because I think they felt really good about him. And in the moment, you could kind of see I think they like this guy. We'll see if they're right or wrong. They've been pretty right. But either way, I mean, this is going to be an incredibly, incredibly fun game. I am also glad that I am not covering a game this weekend because I'll be a little low on sleep, but I can make up for it. So I'll be, up till 2 a.m. watching this. But I can't wait. I think for me, the run game travels. Give me Boise in this one to just outscore them. There's too much offense here.
So Boise's a 3.5-point favorite. I think you may have said at the beginning.
Yes.
I'm going Boise as well.
Yeah, I'm going Boise. No, I'm going Boise. Ashton Jensen runs away with it. But David, I'm not gonna let you live down the fact that you just admitted that you watch ESPN Game Day instead of the CBS pregame show from 9 to 12.
My bad.
My feelings are hurt. I'm not gonna lie. That is messed up. So whenever we, if we ever get back to trust falls and stuff like that, I'm never trusting you again, David. Never.
Our colleague Bruce Feldman is on Big Noon Kickoff, and I think I referenced something. We were at a summit one time, and I was like, "Yeah, it's I don't really watch Big Noon Kickoff," and Bruce was like, "Well, thanks, man."
A little support. It goes a long way.
My bad. I forgot. Sorry. Our next game, another really interesting ball game. Notre Dame, a 12.5-point favorite. At Navy, this game is somewhere odd, isn't it? It's not at Navy.
It's in MetLife Stadium.
MetLife Stadium, that's right, in New York, New Jersey. I did find out that the Notre Dame Army game, because I was thinking about covering that one too, that's in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium. So anyway, Notre Dame at Navy at MetLife Stadium. Chris, you've been hyping up the Navy offense and all the things that they do. And Dame, you took a dive into the midshipmen, and what was your takeaway from what you saw from what the midshipmen do offensively?
Well, first of all, Chris, do you guys have any idea what you call this offense? Like what's the name? What's the style?
It's a good question, actually.
What is this, like pro style wing tee? Like
they've added wing. They've added wing tee. They've added this is the Cronic offense from offensive coordinator Drew Cronic, who was the head coach at Mercer. Takes this is Brian Newberry, the head coach's second year. He makes an OC change after 1 year, brings in Cronic, and he's added wing tee formations to the option that they already run and pro style passing attacks. And so, like, when we were figuring out what to talk about this game, I said to Damien, watch a little bit of Navy, because this offense it's not just a triple option offense. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. And is that what you ended up
saying? I had a hard time figuring out what the hell I was watching. I'm not gonna lie, but it's exciting as hell. But I'm thinking, like, from a defensive perspective, from like a defensive coordinator, like, holy hell, like, what do you even call? Like, what coverage do you run? What blitz pass? Like, what's your base defense? Because the thing about this offense is there's no keys, there's no reads, and that's really what a defense is based off of. Defense is always, every defense I've ever been around, I've always heard the term read and react. So you read your keys, whether the offense pop up in a pass set, or if they're down run blocking, then you know it's run, you know it's pass, right? Or whether the receiver split is out too wide to come in a run block, or, you know, there's a lot of keys and things that you can read as a defense, and then you then you can communicate and try to get that to other guys and kind of get a jump on at least where the ball is going. But like with this offense, with the formations, with the shifts, with the motions, like the ball can spit out left, it can spit out right, it can be a fullback dive, it can be an option, it can be a toss to the running back, who then throws a jump ball to Blake Horvath, which what quarterback in college football right now can win a jump ball besides this guy? I haven't even seen that since
I feel like Milroe. I like Milroe's odds there.
Listen, I'm not talking about Alabama right now. I'm not going to do it. But this offense is this is obviously the most productive offense that they've ever had. And I think it's just because of the term eye candy that we always talk about. There's so much, there's so many things. Like, you don't know where the ball's going. You don't know who's going to get it. Like I said, there's nothing you can read and then communicate, make a call to other guys, get you in a better defense. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome to see. And a lot of guys are having a lot of success because, again, the defense just doesn't know who's going to get the ball, where the point of attack is going to be, where the formation is indicating. Like, you know nothing as a defense going against Navy.
And they've got an explosive passing game, despite
really
this being a they have six completions of at least 40 yards through 6 games. Last year they had 6 all season. Like, this is not a team that will pass the ball a ton, but they're passing it in a different way than they did before. Like, Navy's now, they're about 125th in passing yards per game. They were up in like the 110s, but normally the service academies are dead last. Like, Army's last, Air Force is second last, Navy's always there as well. So, like, they are passing the ball a little bit more and better than they have in forever. And that goes back to the offense, and also Blake Horvath, who the coaches have said, they've told me, he got so much better at throwing the ball in the offseason. That gave them the comfortability to add that to the offense.
If you watch them, there's receivers running free in the secondary all the time because of that eye candy.
And Notre Dame happened to just lose a potential first round cornerback, Benjamin Morris.
I am scared that this will be a crash to earth moment for Navy. So if it's Notre Dame like 31-7, I can't say that I would be floored, but I'm going to go with Navy here to push Notre Dame, maybe beat them. I would maybe put a little sprinkle on a Navy money line, but I like Navy to cover here. Dane, what do you like?
I'm with you. I like Navy to cover, maybe even win it. Just maybe. Just maybe.
Chris, where are you at?
Well, remember last year it was 42-3 in the Ireland game. Notre Dame won this game, but that was also the first game under Newberry.
Estime was much better last year.
It's a completely different Navy team, but you know, Notre Dame's a good running team. Navy's still not great at stopping the run. That's where it's got to happen, whether it's Riley Leonard, whether it's running backs, run the ball. But 12.5, I can see Navy cover that. I feel like Navy sometimes, like a couple of years ago, this was like a 1-score game. Navy almost made a big comeback. So this game can get a little weird, even if Notre Dame always wins it. I get same thing. Navy covers, but Notre Dame wins.
Before we get to the game, Chris, why do people think I'm crazy for saying that Notre Dame is not getting left out at 10-2? They've got a road win at A&M. Okay, Purdue, Miami of Ohio. That win's going to get better week by week. Louisville, Georgia Tech. Then you got Navy, Army, and USC. If you can get 2 of those 3, and then Florida State and Virginia, there's not a ton of throw them a parade win, but you're going to have a bunch of top 50, top 60 wins, probably a couple top 25 wins. We'll see what Navy and Army end up being. I don't even think it's going to be close. I had people texting me this week. I had people tweeting at me on the show that Notre Dame definitely getting in at 10-2. Are you crazy? Other teams are going to lose. I feel like I'm going insane here. What are people talking about?
The problem is, who do they lose to? Because nobody else on their schedule.
I think they'd be better off losing to Florida State. The committee doesn't care who you lose to.
USC.
It doesn't really matter. You want as many quality wins as possible. And I think so many people are stuck in the 2006 way of thinking where it's they lost to Northern Illinois. The pollsters are going to, punish them. The pollsters would, but the committee operates differently. Yeah. It's crazy to me.
It's what I said earlier in the show, which is it's not about what in your mind a playoff team is.
Mm-hmm.
It's what everybody else is. Nobody is undefeated in the SEC. There's we're going to see potentially some more of those undefeateds knock off. How much is the SEC going to beat itself up? Notre Dame is currently not in my field, and they're not in some other people's field. So 10-2, if they get another loss that knocks them down, I don't know if they have enough time to make up for it. It's going to depend what happens elsewhere. I would not say a 10-2 Notre Dame is definitely in or definitely out. I really think that's when you get on the bubble, and we just don't know what the bubble is going to look like right now.
90% in. Next, we have Indiana playing without Curtis Rourke, still a 6.5-point favorite against Washington. New coach Jed Fish, Will Rogers on there. The over-under in this game, 53.5. Chris, are we nervous about the Hoosiers?
Well, yeah, because Curtis Rourke hurt that. I think it was his thumb in the game last week.
Yeah, I thought it would look like it was probably a cut that he probably had a bunch of stitches on, but then Pete Thamel reported this week he had to have surgery. That made me nervous. I was like, surgery? Okay, I just thought he cut it pretty good, where it was going to be really painful.
That's what I figured as well. So I don't know. It's hard to say. Last week's offense did well without him in that second half of what they did against Nebraska. So, again, Indiana here, if you win this game, your Big Ten path is there. Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Purdue. There's a scenario that's been floated out there of a 5-way tie for first place in the Big Ten. That's very doable because, again, these conferences are gigantic and they're not playing enough games against each other because of how it looks. But Washington, they're decent, they're competent.
Yeah.
They should have won that game at Rutgers. They just blew it in some missed field goals and some stuff like that. I think if they win that game, we probably feel differently about this team. The Washington State game came down to the last play. They did get destroyed by Iowa. That didn't help, but they're competent. But if Indiana wins this game, that's really when the path opens up. But Ubben, give us some more on Taven Jackson, because he was
so he's an Indianapolis native.
He's a quarterback. He's a quarterback taking over for Curtis Rourke.
Taven Jackson will be playing with or for Indiana this week. He's an Indianapolis kid. He was Josh Heupel's, I believe, first quarterback commit at Tennessee. Came to Tennessee, was there for a year. Came very quickly. He quickly realized that his path to the field was minimal. They brought in, Hendon Hooker, I think, preceded him, but they added Joe Milton in the spring, and then they had Nico coming through. So he transfers to Indiana, got recruited over again. It looked like he might be the guy this year, but things changed. They bring in Curtis Rourke, who's played ahead of him. But Taven Jackson's a 4-star commit, good player. Threw some really good balls last week in that Nebraska game. I think Indiana will be mostly fine here. Next up, we got a big time.
We got to make our picks. I don't think
our picks.
Right. You over here just trying to speed past.
Apologies. I'm gonna ride with the Indiana bandwagon. Give me the Hoosiers to keep it rolling. Dame, who you like in this one?
I like Indiana in this game. I think even without Curtis Rourke, I think they'll be okay. Justice Ellison has been great for them on the ground. He's averaging about 7 yards a carry. Had 100 yards last week, so I think he can keep them kind of balanced on offense. You just convinced us that Taven Jackson is, ready for this moment. So I'm gonna go with Indiana.
Yeah, they're good everywhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, Indiana's still top 25 in yards per carry as a rushing team. So you take out Curtis Rourke, they can still run the ball pretty well, and I think they're going to do that. And Washington couldn't really stop Iowa, and so I'm gonna go Indiana covers the 6.5 as well.
Yeah, they got a bunch of good targets, good on the lines, good backs. Rourke's a huge loss, but I think they can take it in this game. I'd be more nervous if it was Michigan or obviously Ohio State. We got a huge narrative game Alabama and Missouri. Alabama a 13.5-point favorite in that game. The over-under 55.5. Missouri probably fairly, because people were commenting on their schedule. They lose in pretty resounding fashion in Aggie land. And despite the fact they have one loss, they fall all the way out. They've kind of, with close wins the last couple weeks, have kind of continued to fall down the polls. They're outside of the top 20 now. Bama, meanwhile, has 2 losses already. The loser of this game basically has no path to the playoff at all. Missouri, they'll feel okay about the program big picture. Missouri losing to Alabama is not going to cause all kinds of consternation in the program. In the event that Alabama loses and Missouri wins, Missouri will be back in the thick of the playoff conversation. But, man,
we're going to have to start asking some questions.
The fire and brimstone that will be raining down on Titletown.
We'll have to start asking some tough questions.
I am nervous for that environment. Dane, when you watch this, or when you look at this, what are you kind of keeping an eye on?
I mean, the obvious, which is Alabama getting back to playing winning style of football and having a winning culture. Yeah. But if you want me to give you X's and O's, I've said it on this show before. I've said it other places. I want to see Alabama develop some offense outside of Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams.
Yeah, that's a big need.
And another perspective to look at, right? This kid is 17 years old, which again, that is that won our Minis award for what the most played out line. But think about it this way. This kid is getting 20 targets. It looks like a game right now. If he averages that through 3 years, he's going to be banged up. He's going to be tired. There's going to be a lot of tread on his tires. And you do not want to wear this guy down. That's on top of the fact of you're getting the offensive production. Like, teams are figuring that out. Teams are figuring out how to shut down Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams. Like, they're finding a way to keep them in a box and say, okay, 7 yards per reception. You're not going to beat it. We're not going to let these two beat us. We're not going to let Jalen Milroe just run around and throw to Ryan Williams. Like, that's not going to be the game plan. They're going to make other guys beat them. Well, like, let's do that. You have other guys. May I remind you about Jan Miller, Justice Hayes, other guys. Caleb Prentice. Is he back this week? I know he's been injured before, but it's another guy, if he's healthy, that you can get the ball to. So that, on top of, which now here I go, about to start rambling, on top of cleaning up the penalties and playing more disciplined football and not being complacent and, walking into the stadium thinking that you're just going to win because you got the A on the chest. You got to go out there and compete for 4 quarters, play good, clean football. Like I said, get that winning culture back, play complimentary football, winning football. That, in a nutshell, David, that's what I'm looking for this game.
Dave, who you like? Does Bama get right here?
I will say this, and this is bad news for Mizzou, but good news for Alabama. What's his name? Nate Noel. He is out for Missouri, and that's
Missouri's leading rusher.
Yeah, Missouri's leading rusher. That's going to be a huge blow, especially because Alabama's been very susceptible to the run. With that being said, I like Alabama to win, but I think this is just another close, ugly game that it's just going to come down to the wire.
So Missouri covers, you think, the 13.5?
Yeah, definitely.
I was originally picking that until Nate Noel was out, the App State transfer running back. On top of that, Brady Cook is still dealing with a high ankle sprain that he went to the hospital mid-game
That's right.
And Eli Drinkwitz canceled the media viewing of practice this week. He's not saying anything really about Brady Cook's status. So we'll see. I think those injuries, coupled with, Missouri's front is not as good as South Carolina and some of the other teams that Alabama's been playing. I think Alabama gets right. I think they cover the 13.5.
Yeah, I think Alabama wins this big. It's Missouri. The weird thing about this offense is it's not really been explosive in the passing game, like, at all this season. And against Alabama with a banged up Brady Cook and no leading rusher, that's not the time you're going to suddenly find that. So I like Alabama to win this thing and win this thing big, probably ugly. People haven't been paying attention to Colorado to the amount that they did a year ago. Their TV ratings are down about 50%. They haven't really been the same cultural touchstone that they were a season ago when they got out to that hot start. And, why that is, I think there's a bunch of reasons why. But regardless, Colorado is playing much, much better football. And the defense is the biggest reason why. The offensive line is still really bad. They've kind of duct tape and twined a running game a little bit the last few weeks. Now they play a Cincinnati team that I like to joke about how USC is the best 3 and 4 team in America. Cincinnati might be the worst 5 team in America. I am not impressed with the team.
And they're one Pitt comeback away from being 6-1.
Very much so.
Like they haven't even played very well.
Exactly. This Cincy team, I think they found a little something in Brendan Sorsby. I like those pieces, but I think Colorado, this is going to be a really interesting game. And if Colorado wins this, they're in a bowl game. And not only in a bowl game, like they're in the mix for the Big 12 championship. I don't know that they're going to get there, but who would have thought we'd get to Halloween and Colorado would be right in the middle of the Big 12 race? And yet, if they win this weekend, there's 6 teams in the Big 12 that have 0 or 1 loss, and Colorado can eliminate one of those with this win. Dame, what have you made of Colorado in year 2?
Yeah, well, I got to agree with you, but I got to disagree with you because the reason why they're winning is because of Shedeur Sanders. This guy, I got to give him his flowers, and I try to every opportunity that I get, because if he was playing at Georgia or Texas or Oregon or Ohio State, we would be talking about him for Heisman contention. We would be talking about him for potential number 1 pick. Like, we would be really talking about Shedeur in a whole different light. Now, granted, that's not the situation. He's at Colorado, and what is he doing? He's winning. He's producing. His offensive line, you just said it. That's the one remaining piece of the puzzle that they have not figured out yet, and he's still balling every chance he gets. He takes hits. He gets beat up. He's running around trying to save himself in the pocket all the time. But he's always finding guys. And even with Travis Hunter being out, even with guys being banged up at the receiver position, he's always putting up numbers. He's always putting up performances that leads Colorado to be in positions to win these games. So that's what I've seen. I mean, we've seen the media circus with Deion, obviously the Heisman talk with Travis and everything. And again, we're looking over the fact that we're watching a really, really, really good quarterback play really high-level football. And it's masked by, like I said, his dad being Deion Sanders. He's playing with a Heisman favorite. He's playing with a terrible offensive line, doesn't have the best running game. Their defense is just now being able to stop guys. But like I said, we're overlooking the fact that a really good quarterback is at Colorado, and his name is Shedeur Sanders.
Chris,
real quick on this, by the way. Colorado 3 straight road wins for the first time since 1996. Also, Travis Hunter obviously missed the second half against Arizona. Deion says he feels better, so we'll see his status up in the air.
2 road wins by more than 27 points for the first time since 1989, by the way, when they were 11-0 under Bill McCartney.
Where the haters at now?
Chris, before we go, we got 2 SEC or 2 ACC showdowns, Syracuse and Pitt, and SMU and Duke. I look at those and I see 3 fun teams and Duke. Before we get out of here, Chris, am I hating on Duke? Syracuse Pitt's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to watch that game. SMU, we've apologized to previously. What are you watching in those games?
Yeah, I mean, Syracuse Pitt, I expect a lot of points. These are 2 offenses that have been very, very fun. I'm trying to look up what the over-under in that one is.
I think it's like 66.
62 and a half. I'm actually kind of low. I kind of would have figured high, but that'll be a really fun game.
Over on that?
I might. It looks like
I probably would.
6-point favorite. Looks like Pitt's a 6-point favorite. And then SMU Duke. SMU, who people haven't paid much attention to the last 2 weeks. They did lose star tight end RJ Maryland out for the year.
Bad hit.
Yeah, the blowout loss, the blowout win against Stanford. That is a big loss. But if SMU and Pitt both win, they're both going to be undefeated in ACC play going into a game against each other next week that I will probably be at. And there's a very real possibility here. We end up with Miami, Clemson, and SMU all undefeated in ACC play at the end of the season because they don't play each other. And so again,
not a fan of that. Not a fan of that.
Again, we're kind of heading toward these nightmare conference tiebreaker scenarios. So if you're the ACC, you're kind of hoping maybe some of these teams lose. It's not as much of a thing, but 2 big ACC games setting up a big one next week. Not just Miami and Clemson in the ACC right now. They got a lot of like real solid teams underneath that top tier.
Well, thank you guys for listening. Please consider subscribing to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. We are there. We publish 3 podcasts a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays throughout the college football season. And subscribing to the podcast not only helps us, but it helps you because every time we publish an episode, it is delivered straight to your device, automatically downloaded. Leave us a review. Any support from you guys listening is greatly appreciated. And You can see our smiling faces at youtube.com/Until Saturday. We have a bunch of stuff there. And call the Until Saturday phone line this weekend. Leave us a voicemail for our Monday reaction show. That's 316-462-9852. We've had some great entries this season. And check out the Until Saturday newsletter as well. Jana Bardall does that for us. She does a great job there, and it's free. You can find the links to the newsletter, the YouTube channel, everything in our show's description. Once again, for Damien Harris, Chris Vannini, I'm David Ubben. We will talk to you on Monday, and hopefully by then we'll have brought back the turnover chain. See you guys on Monday.